The unexpected students. Grand Instructor Nixthalian's crystalline appendages trembled slightly as he reviewed the latest admission records for the Galactic Defense Academy. His typically iridescent scales dulled to a concerned gray as he processed the information before him. Humans. They were actually sending humans to the academy. This is unprecedented, he muttered to his assistant, Instructor Gireth, whose gelatinous form rippled with equal apprehension. 3 human cadets, straight from their Earth military academy. Their physical capabilities alone. Should we adjust the training protocols? Gireth's translucent body pulsed with anxiety patterns. Their endurance levels exceed our safety parameters by factors of 10. Before Nixthalian could respond, a soft chime announced the arrival of the very subjects of their discussion. The door to the administrative chamber dilated open, revealing 3 figures that seemed deceptively ordinary at first glance. Standing at the front was Cadet James Rodriguez, flanked by Cadets Priya Patel and Marcus Thompson. They looked almost fragile compared to the heavily armored or naturally armored species that typically walked these halls. Grand Instructor, Rodriguez said with a respectful nod, his voice steady and clear. Thank you for accepting us into your prestigious academy. Nixthalian's scales shifted to a formal blue-green as he straightened to his full height. Welcome, Earth Cadets. I trust your journey through the quantum gates was comfortable? Oh yes, Priya responded with what the aliens recognized as a smile, though they'd been briefed that human facial expressions could be deceiving. Though we're eager to begin our training. Marcus Thompson, the tallest of the 3, was already studying the holographic training schedules floating around the room with keen interest. His eyes tracked the complex quantum calculations with unexpected ease, another reminder that these Deathworlders were full of surprises. Perhaps we should begin with an evaluation of your basic capabilities, Gireth suggested, her form undulating with what she hoped was a soothing pattern. To establish appropriate safety protocols. Rodriguez exchanged glances with his fellow cadets, a subtle communication that didn't go unnoticed by their new instructors. With respect, sir, ma'am, we've already submitted our physical baseline data from Earth. We're actually quite interested in the advanced tactical training modules we've heard so much about. Nixthalian's scales flickered with surprise. The legendary tactical modules were typically reserved for senior cadets, not newcomers who hadn't even proven their basic competencies. Yet something in the human's tone gave him pause. It wasn't arrogance, he'd been trained to recognize that in dozens of species. This was different. It was curiosity. The tactical modules are extremely demanding, he said carefully. They require a deep understanding of multi-species combat dynamics, quantum probability matrices, and psychological warfare principles that most species spend years mastering. Priya stepped forward, her dark eyes bright with interest. That's exactly why we're here, Grand Instructor. Earth's military academy has excellent physical training, but we came to learn things we couldn't learn at home. To understand how different species think and fight. To contribute our perspective to the galactic defense community. Gireth's form rippled with what might have been amusement. You believe humans have something to teach us about warfare? Your species has only been spacefaring for less than 2 centuries. Sometimes fresh eyes see what experienced ones miss, Marcus spoke up, finally turning away from the holographic displays. We've studied the historical records you sent us. The Siege of Proxima 7, the Neural Network Crisis, the Quantum Plague Defense. In each case, it was an unexpected approach that turned the tide. Nixthalian found his scales shifting to a thoughtful purple. These humans were not what he expected. Their files had painted them as physically superior specimens, yes, but had said little about their tactical acumen or their evident diplomatic skills. They weren't demanding special treatment or boasting about their capabilities. Instead, they were offering to contribute while openly acknowledging their desire to learn. Very well, he decided, his crystalline appendages arranging themselves into a formal pattern. We will begin your orientation tomorrow with the standard protocols. However, he added, noting their barely concealed disappointment, if you demonstrate sufficient mastery of the basics, I see no reason why we couldn't accelerate your progression to more advanced modules. The humans' faces lit up with those disconcerting smiles again, but Nixthalion was starting to understand that they were genuine expressions of pleasure rather than the threat displays he'd initially feared them to be. As the cadets left the chamber, Jireth turned to her superior. Do you really think they're ready for the advanced modules? No species has ever completed the basic training in less than a standard quarter cycle. Nixthalion's scales shimmered with an emotion he couldn't quite name. I think, my dear colleague, that we're about to learn as much from them as they will from us. Did you notice how Thompson was analyzing our quantum displays? Or how Rodriguez managed to make his request sound like an opportunity rather than a demand? Even Patel's body language was carefully calibrated to put us at ease. They're more sophisticated than their files suggested, Jireth agreed, her form swirling with complex patterns. Indeed. And I have a feeling they're about to shake up more than just our training protocols. Send a message to the other instructors. Tell them to prepare for unprecedented circumstances. As Nixthalion turned back to his duties, his scales shifted to a color he hadn't displayed in centuries, anticipation. Tomorrow would mark the beginning of something new in the Galactic Defense Academy's long history. Whether that was good or bad remained to be seen, but one thing was certain, it wouldn't be boring. Breaking protocol. The training arena's quantum-shielded walls hummed with energy as Instructor Jireth observed the morning's basic combat assessment. Her gelatinous form rippled with increasing concern as she watched Cadet Rodriguez spar with a Meridian battle drone, without wearing the mandatory exoskeleton armor. Cadet, you must follow safety protocols, she called out, her voice modulator struggling to convey her alarm. Your endoskeletal structure cannot withstand. Her warning was cut short as Rodriguez executed a flawless dodge, the battle drone's plasma-charged appendage missing him by millimeters. What happened next defied her species' understanding of bipedal locomotion. The human dropped, rolled, and somehow used the drone's own momentum to send it crashing into the arena floor. Sorry, Instructor, Rodriguez called out, barely breathing hard. The exoskeleton actually limits our mobility. We're more effective without it. Across the arena, Priya Patel was demonstrating equally perplexing abilities in the zero-gravity combat chamber. While other species relied on propulsion packs or neural interfaces to navigate three-dimensional space, she moved with an intuitive grace that seemed to ignore the need for such aids. Fascinating, muttered Grand Instructor Nixthalion, who had arrived to observe the morning sessions. His crystalline appendages shifted through various analytical patterns. They're using their planet's high-gravity training to their advantage. Every movement is precisely calculated for maximum efficiency. Marcus Thompson's performance in the tactical simulation chamber was perhaps the most surprising. The holographic battlefield before him depicted a classic scenario, defending a quantum communications relay from a superior force. While most cadets attempted to fortify their position with shield generators and automated defense systems, Thompson had taken an unexpected approach. Cadet, called out Combat Instructor Vrexthor, his chitinous exoskeleton clicking with confusion, why are you dismantling the shield generators? With respect, sir, Thompson replied while his hands flew over the holographic controls, shields announce our presence and position. We can use the components to create a series of decoy relays instead. The enemy will waste resources attacking false targets while we maintain communications through a mobile, underground network. The three senior instructors exchanged meaningful glances. In just one morning, these humans had demonstrated approaches that none of their previous students had conceived in centuries of training. During the midday nutrition break, Jireth found herself analyzing footage from the morning sessions with unusually intense interest. Their biological limitations should make them more cautious, she mused to Nixthalion. Instead, they seem to view every constraint as a puzzle to be solved. It's their evolutionary background, Nixthalion replied, his scales shifting to a scholarly azure. Most spacefaring species evolved in stable environments, developing specialized adaptations. Humans come from a planet that forced them to adapt to constant change. They don't see limitations, they see opportunities for innovation. The afternoon sessions proved even more enlightening. During the multi-species coordination exercise, the human cadets demonstrated an unexpected talent for bringing out the best in their alien teammates. Rodriguez's unit discovered they could use a Zentarian's natural crystalline resonance in combination with human reaction speeds to create devastating close combat combinations. Patel helped a group of morphic cadets understand how their fluid bodies could mimic human martial arts techniques to devastating effect. But it was during the final exercise of the day that the instructors truly began to understand what they were dealing with. The scenario was simple: evacuate civilians from a facility under attack. Most species approached this as a purely tactical challenge. The humans, however, brought something entirely different to the table. "They're telling jokes," Vrexthor observed incredulously, watching the humans interact with the holographic civilians. In the middle of a combat situation. "Not just jokes," Nixthalion corrected, his scales pulsing with revelation. "They're using humor to manage fear. Look at how the civilians are responding, anxiety levels dropping, cooperation increasing, movement speed optimizing." As the day's training concluded, the instructors gathered in the assessment chamber, their usual protocols and metrics seeming somehow inadequate to evaluate what they'd witnessed. "They're breaking every rule in our training manual," Vrexthor chittered, "yet achieving results that exceed our highest benchmarks." "Perhaps," Gireth suggested, her form swirling thoughtfully, "we need to reconsider what constitutes breaking protocol. Their methods are unorthodox, but their effectiveness is undeniable." Nixthalion's scales shifted to a deep, contemplative indigo. "More than that, they're teaching us something vital about adaptability. Our training programs have focused on perfecting established techniques. These humans are showing us the value of creative problem-solving." As if to underscore his point, a notification chimed on their neural interfaces. The human cadets had submitted a formal request to attempt the legendary siege simulation, the very next day. "Impossible," Vrexthor clicked. "No one attempts the siege without at least a full cycle of basic training. It's suicide." "And yet," Nixthalion mused, his scales flickering with that same anticipation from the day before, "I find myself wondering what they see that we don't. Their request includes a preliminary strategy brief that, well, I suggest you review it yourselves." As the other instructors absorbed the humans' proposal, their expressions shifted from skepticism to astonishment. The approach was unorthodox, arguably reckless, and yet, it contained possibilities none of them had considered in a century of running the simulation. "We should allow it," Gireth declared, surprising herself with her certainty. "Even if they fail, we stand to learn valuable lessons about human problem-solving approaches." "Agreed," Nixthalion said, his scales settling into a determined copper hue. "Send word to the simulation chamber technicians. Tomorrow, we either witness a spectacular failure, or we rewrite our understanding of what's possible in tactical training." As the instructors filed out, Nixthalion remained behind, studying the humans' proposal with growing fascination. In just one day, 3 human cadets had challenged centuries of established military doctrine. Tomorrow, they would either prove themselves brilliant innovators or demonstrate why the old ways had endured so long. Either way, the Galactic Defense Academy would never be quite the same. The legendary simulation. The simulation chamber's control room buzzed with unusual activity as dawn broke over the Galactic Defense Academy. Word had spread quickly about the humans' attempt at the siege simulation, drawing a crowd of curious instructors and senior cadets. The chamber's quantum processors hummed as they generated the infamous scenario that had humbled the galaxy's finest tactical minds for a century. "A reminder of the parameters," Nixthalion announced, his crystalline form refracting the morning light. "The siege simulation recreates the defense of Centauri Prime. Defenders must protect a planetary shield generator against overwhelming forces for 72 standard hours. No species has ever achieved this objective. The current record for survival is 4 hours and 17 minutes. Giretha's gelatinous form rippled as she observed the 3 human cadets preparing for the simulation. They looked oddly relaxed, Rodriguez checking his neural interface connections while Patel and Thompson discussed something in low voices. Beginning simulation in 3, 2, 1. Vrexthor's chitinous appendages moved across the control panel with practiced precision. The chamber transformed around the human cadets, reconstructing the harsh landscape of Centauri Prime. The massive shield generator facility materialized behind them, its quantum cores pulsing with simulated energy. "First wave approaching," announced the automated system. Multiple hostile craft detected entering atmosphere. The assembled observers expected the humans to immediately fortify their position or call for reinforcements, standard opening moves that had been attempted countless times before. Instead, Rodriguez turned to his teammates with what the aliens had learned to recognize as a grin. "Ready to show them something new?" he asked. What happened next left the observation room in stunned silence. Instead of defending the shield generator, the humans began to systematically dismantle it. "They've lost their minds," muttered a senior Zentarian cadet. "Without the shields, the facility will be destroyed in minutes." But destruction didn't come. As enemy forces descended through the atmosphere, they encountered nothing. No energy signatures, no defense systems, no signs of the shield generator they were tasked with destroying. The humans had completely masked their presence. Fascinating, Nixthalian's scales shifted to an analytical purple. They're using the enemy's intelligence against them. The attackers know their target should be here, but they can't find it. In the simulation, the 3 humans had converted the shield generator into something entirely different. Thompson's engineering skills had transformed the primary components into a network of smaller, mobile units. Patel had calculated optimal hiding spots using the planet's natural geological features, while Rodriguez coordinated their deployment with precise timing. "Look at their resource management," Gireth observed, her form pulsing with excitement. "They're not just hiding, they're redistributing power through a decentralized network. Even if the enemy finds one unit, the others remain functional." The first hour passed, then the second. The enemy forces grew increasingly frustrated, their search patterns becoming more erratic. The humans used this confusion to their advantage, occasionally activating a shield unit in one location only to have it disappear before it could be targeted, drawing enemy forces away from the actual components. "This is unprecedented," Vrexthor clicked. "They're not just surviving, they're controlling the battlefield's psychological dynamics. The enemy is losing coherence, becoming desperate." By the 4th hour, the previous survival record had been broken, but the humans showed no sign of tiring. Their strategy evolved constantly, adapting to each new enemy tactic. When the attackers deployed ground forces, the humans used the dismantled shield generator components to create phantom energy signatures, leading entire battalions into empty caverns or endless search patterns. 6 hours, announced the automated system. The observation room had grown crowded as word spread through the academy. Even some of the most senior military advisors had arrived to witness the unprecedented display. "They're rewriting tactical doctrine before our eyes," Nixthalian mused. Every species before them tried to win through superior firepower or defensive capabilities. These humans, they're winning by making the enemy defeat themselves. As the 12th hour approached, something remarkable happened. The enemy forces, their resources depleted and their troops demoralized by the endless failed search, began to retreat. The simulation's artificial intelligence, programmed to behave with perfect military logic, had concluded that the mission was impossible to complete. The chamber fell silent as the simulation ended, the holographic battlefield fading away to reveal 3 tired but triumphant human cadets. They had not just survived the siege, they had won it without firing a single shot. How? Demanded one of the senior military advisors, their cybernetic implants whirring with agitation. How did you know this would work? Priya Patel stepped forward, her voice steady despite her exhaustion. We studied the simulation's history. Every species attempted to outfight the enemy, but we realized something: the scenario never specified that we had to engage in direct combat. The objective was simply to protect the shield generator's functionality. Sometimes the best defense, Rodriguez added, is making your enemy question whether there's anything to attack at all. Thompson nodded. On Earth, we have a saying: the supreme art of war is to subdue the enemy without fighting. We just applied that principle on a planetary scale. Nixthalian's scales shifted through a rainbow of colors before settling on a deep gold, the color of profound respect. You haven't just completed the simulation, he announced. You've demonstrated that there are still new approaches to warfare that our galaxy has yet to discover. As the crowd began to disperse, discussing the implications of what they'd witnessed, Gireth noticed something peculiar. The humans weren't celebrating their historic victory. Instead, they were already deep in discussion about how their strategy could be improved. Remarkable, she pulsed to Nixthalian. They've achieved the impossible, yet they're still looking for ways to do better. Perhaps, Nixthalian replied, his scales shimmering with insight, that's exactly why they achieved the impossible in the first place. Human innovation. News of the siege simulation's conquest spread through the Galactic Defense Academy like a quantum wave, creating ripples of excitement and controversy. In the days following the humans' victory, the Academy's usually orderly halls buzzed with debate and speculation. Senior military theorists arrived from across the galaxy, drawn by reports that seemed too extraordinary to believe. In the Academy's Grand Lecture Hall, Nixthalian faced an audience of the galaxy's most distinguished military minds. His crystalline form refracted light in complex patterns as he presented the human simulation data. As you can see, he gestured to the holographic replay, Cadets Rodriguez, Patel, and Thompson fundamentally redefined our understanding of strategic defense. Their approach challenges a century of established doctrine. A Quantarian admiral, their cybernetic enhancements glowing with skepticism, raised an objection. This was merely a simulation. In real combat, such unorthodox methods would prove far too risky. With respect, Admiral, Rodriguez's voice came from the back of the hall, where the three human cadets had been quietly observing. History suggests otherwise. The hall fell silent as Rodriguez made his way to the presentation platform, Patel and Thompson following close behind. Their confidence, tempered by obvious respect for the assembled dignitaries, caught the attention of every being present. Throughout human history, Rodriguez continued, many of our most significant military victories came from refusing to fight on expected terms. When faced with superior forces, we learned to change the nature of the battlefield itself. Patel stepped forward, pulling up historical data on the holographic display. We've analyzed thousands of conflicts from various species' histories. A pattern emerged: the most devastating defeats often came not from superior firepower, but from an inability to adapt when an enemy did something unexpected. That's precisely why we approached the siege simulation differently, Thompson added, manipulating the hologram to show their decentralized shield generator network. We didn't try to win the scenario as it was presented. We changed the scenario itself. The hall erupted in discussion, hundreds of voices debating the implications. A Meridian strategic director raised her crystalline appendage. But surely such tactics increase civilian casualties? Without strong defensive positions. Actually, Patel interrupted politely, bringing up new data. Our approach reduced projected civilian casualties to zero. By removing obvious military targets, we eliminated the need for large-scale defensive or offensive operations in populated areas. Nixthalian watched with pride as his human students handled each question with a combination of technical expertise and diplomatic grace. They weren't just defending their victory, they were teaching some of the galaxy's greatest military minds a new way of thinking about warfare itself. The discussions continued late into the day, with various species offering their own perspectives on the humans' innovations. A Zentarian weapons specialist suggested combining their decentralization tactics with traditional shield technology. A morphic combat expert proposed new training protocols incorporating human adaptability principles. But it was during the evening session that the most significant breakthrough occurred. As the humans explained their thought process, Giretha's gelatinous form suddenly pulsed with excitement. "Don't you see?" she addressed the assembly. "The true innovation isn't in the specific tactics they used. It's in their fundamental approach to problem solving. They didn't try to find the best solution within the established parameters, they questioned whether those parameters were necessary at all." The implications of this realization rippled through the hall. One by one, military leaders began sharing examples from their own experiences where rigid adherence to doctrine had led to costly failures. The humans' victory in the siege simulation wasn't just a singular achievement, it was a wake-up call for the entire galactic defense community. "We propose," Nixthalion announced, his scales shifting to a formal blue-green, "the establishment of a new training division at the Academy. One focused not on teaching established tactics, but on developing this kind of adaptive, innovative thinking." The proposal met with immediate support. Even the most skeptical officials had been convinced by the day's discussions. The humans' approach had exposed a crucial gap in their military preparation, the ability to think beyond conventional boundaries. As the session concluded, Rodriguez, Patel, and Thompson found themselves surrounded by military leaders eager to learn more. The three cadets handled the attention with characteristic humility, emphasizing that they were still students themselves, eager to learn from other species' experiences. "The most valuable lesson," Rodriguez explained to a group of fascinated officers, "is that every species has unique perspectives and capabilities. The key is learning to see limitations as opportunities for innovation." Later that evening, in the quiet of his office, Nixthalion reviewed the day's proceedings with Gireth. "When these humans first arrived," he mused, his scales shifting to a contemplative purple, "I worried they might disrupt our carefully structured training programs." "They did disrupt them," Gireth pulsed with amusement. "But perhaps that's exactly what we needed." "Indeed," Nixthalion agreed. "They've shown us that true strength lies not in perfecting what we already know, but in being willing to imagine what might be possible." As night fell over the Academy, the implications of the day's events continued to spread. Across the galaxy, military strategists began reviewing their own doctrine with fresh eyes, wondering what other assumptions might be waiting to be challenged. The humans' victory in a simple training simulation had sparked something far more significant, a revolution in how the galaxy thought about the very nature of warfare and defense. A new understanding. One standard galactic month after the historic siege simulation victory, the Galactic Defense Academy had transformed in ways no one could have predicted. The traditional rigid hierarchy of the institution had given way to a more dynamic, collaborative environment. In the newly established Innovation Division, species from across the galaxy worked together, each contributing their unique perspectives to tactical problems that had once seemed insurmountable. Grand Instructor Nixthalion stood at his favorite observation point, his crystalline form reflecting the light of 3 setting suns as he watched a training session below. Rodriguez was leading a mixed-species unit through an urban combat scenario, but not in any traditional way. The human had somehow combined a Zentarian's natural crystalline resonance with a morphic's fluid adaptability to create an entirely new approach to room-clearing operations. "Remarkable how much has changed in so little time," Gireth observed, her gelatinous form sliding up beside him. "Did you see Patel's session this morning? She taught the Quantarian cadets how to use their cybernetic enhancements for psychological warfare rather than just combat calculations. And Thompson's engineering innovations have already been adopted by 3 major fleet dockyards," Nixthalion added, his scales shifting to a proud gold. "But what impresses me most is how they've maintained their hunger to learn even while teaching others. Below them, Rodriguez's team successfully completed their exercise using less than half the standard resource allocation. The human gathered his diverse squad for a debriefing, making sure each member contributed their observations before sharing his own thoughts. "They've taught us something far more valuable than new tactics," Nixthalion mused. "They've shown us that true strength lies in combining our differences rather than trying to overcome them." The Academy's central plaza had become a hub of constant innovation. Where once cadets had trained in species-segregated units, now the space was filled with diverse groups experimenting with combinations of natural abilities and technological adaptations that no one had previously considered possible. Priya Patel had just finished a session with a group of Meridian energy specialists when she noticed an incoming priority communication. Her expression caught Thompson's attention as he passed by. "Everything all right?" he asked, setting down the quantum toolkit he'd been modifying. "Better than all right," she replied with a growing smile. "The Galactic Defense Council has approved our proposal. They're implementing the adaptive training program across all major military academies." The news spread quickly through the academy, causing excitement even among the traditionally stoic species. In the main conference chamber, Rodriguez presented the final implementation plan to a gathered assembly of instructors and military officials. "The key," he explained, highlighting holographic data points, "is understanding that there's no single, right, way to approach a tactical problem. Every species, every individual, brings unique capabilities and perspectives. Our job isn't to standardize these differences away, but to learn how to combine them in innovative ways." Vrexthor, who had been one of the most skeptical instructors initially, clicked his mandibles in agreement. "In all my cycles of teaching, I never considered that allowing for more chaos in our training might lead to better order in our results." The assembly broke into smaller discussion groups, each focused on different aspects of implementing the new program. The humans moved between them, not as leaders but as facilitators, encouraging the free flow of ideas between species that had traditionally kept to themselves. As the day drew to a close, Nixthalion called for attention. His scales shifted through a complex pattern of colors before settling into a formal configuration. "When these human cadets first arrived, many of us saw only their physical capabilities, their ability to survive in environments we found hostile. We failed to recognize that their true strength lay in their adaptability, their willingness to question established wisdom, and their ability to bring out the best in others." Gireth pulsed in agreement. "They've shown us that the greatest innovations often come not from developing new weapons or defenses, but from learning to use what we already have in ways we never imagined." Rodriguez, Patel, and Thompson stood together at the back of the chamber, their posture reflecting both pride and humility. They had accomplished far more than simply winning an unwinnable simulation. They had catalyzed a fundamental shift in how the galaxy approached military education and strategy. "Our time at the Academy is nearly complete," Rodriguez addressed the assembly. "But what we've built together is just the beginning. Each of you will take these principles back to your home worlds, adapt them to your own needs, and discover new possibilities we haven't even imagined." As the assembly concluded, the three humans found themselves surrounded by allies and friends from dozens of species. The barriers that had once seemed insurmountable had dissolved, replaced by a shared understanding that their differences were not obstacles to overcome, but assets to be celebrated. Later that evening, in a quiet moment between ceremonies, Nixthalion found the three humans in the simulation chamber where their journey had begun. They were already working on modifications to the siege scenario, incorporating suggestions from other species to create even more challenging variations. "You know," Thompson said, looking up from his calculations, "we came here thinking we would learn advanced alien military techniques. Instead, we learned that the most advanced technique of all is simply being willing to learn from each other." Nixthalion's scales shifted to a color he had never displayed before, one that represented a complex mixture of pride, hope, and anticipation for the future. "Perhaps that is why your species has progressed so rapidly," he observed. You never stop looking for new ways to grow, new perspectives to understand, new possibilities to explore. As night fell over the academy, the lights of countless stars reflected off its crystalline spires. In laboratories, training rooms, and simulation chambers, the work continued. The revolution sparked by 3 human cadets had grown into something far greater, a new understanding that the greatest strength lies not in overwhelming power or impenetrable defenses, but in the endless possibilities that emerge when different species learn to work together, each contributing their unique gifts to create something greater than any could achieve alone.